Hello, everyone. Welcome to Compliance 102, Best Practices, Upskilling, and Beyond. We're going to get started in a couple minutes. We have our wonderful Care Academy Compliance Director, Erica Sessions, who's going to be leading this discussion. You probably see her on your screen right now. Give her a round of applause. We're going to get started in just about a minute. If you were part of the Compliance 101 webinar that we had just about a couple of weeks back, you probably already received the video and the slides for that one. So if you're returning, welcome back. If it's the first time here, just because you weren't here for 101 doesn't mean 102 won't make any sense for you. We will recap all the stuff that's going to happen, but we're going to get started in just a couple of minutes. Super. Well, I think we have some critical mass. Let's get started. Erica, off to you. Let's kind of move on to the next slide. Before we get started, a couple of things. This webinar is being recorded. We are going to be sharing the slide deck and a link of this recording after the webinar. So in about 24 hours, you can expect to receive both the slide deck as well as the recording and Q&A. If this is your first time on one of our Zoom webinars, you will notice there's going to be a little bit of button at the bottom to be able to raise your hand. And there's going to be another button that'll allow you to pose Q&A questions. If that is not accessible to you, or if you have trouble finding that, there's also the chat. So if you're able to use the chat, feel free to use it. You can ask questions during the webinar, and you can also ask them kind of post. So feel free to ask them whenever you feel like you need to. We can move on to the next slide. So quick agenda. We're going to get started with just a quick about Care Academy. I'm going to introduce Erica. We're going to talk through Compliance 102, everything as it relates to leveling up and upskilling. We're going to move across some of the key content of this second piece of this two-part webinar series. And then we're going to move into a Q&A. All in all, we should be done in about 45 to 50 minutes, maybe even less, and we can kind of give you some time back. But we can kind of move on to the next slide. And Erica Sessions. So Erica Sessions, second time we're doing this webinar, part 2, she leads a team to map the current regulatory and policy landscape, providing big picture strategy towards the mission to align quality care with the direct care workforce development. She brings deep regulatory policy and project management experience, specializing in long-term care compliance. Erica is really foundational to how we've built out our compliance unit within Care Academy. And I'm really excited that she's going to be hosting this webinar and this learning session. And hopefully a lot of you get a lot out of this. But Erica, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you so much, Ashwin, for the warm welcome and introduction. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I look forward to digging into Compliance 102, how we work beyond compliance and really level up into upskilling. Before we do that, I'll just introduce Care Academy at large. Care Academy offers at-a-glance agency insights through our software platform. We offer advanced compliance automation with leading home care agency management software, such as WellSky, formerly ClearCare, AlayaCare, as well as others. We also offer training that's eligible for college credit at Southern New Hampshire University, which is a really wonderful way for caregivers to leverage their vocational training, their on-the-job training, to pursue a degree in higher education as they see fit. Then finally, all of our classes are designed, our platform is all designed with the intention of meeting the caregiver where they are, which is on the go, often using a mobile phone. So all of our content is engaging and mobile friendly to really ensure that caregivers feel compelled to learn, are engaged in their learning journey, and then complete the classes that they start, both for compliance as well as for skill attainment. So last time, the Compliance 101, we discussed that being compliant is best practice. It is the ethical and mandated adherence to requirements. Sometimes those requirements come in the form of laws and regulations. Sometimes they're conditions of participation, and sometimes they're interpretive guidelines that we figure out on the fly when our licensing authorities aren't very clear about what that is. We shared a couple of stories, including the experience that Care Academy went through as some of our customers went through an audit in Oregon, and some of the learnings that we have from that and how we leverage that in our knowledge today, and how we define and address compliance for our customers, and how customers can leverage that within their own organizations. We talked about the value of compliance, and that meeting the minimum standard really just means that you're at least as good as everyone else, but that going beyond and really excelling in both compliance as well as in upskilling will ensure that you can demonstrate that excellence and really differentiate yourself amongst the competition. And then finally, we wrapped up last time's session with how to be compliant. What are some of the tools that we can use on a regular basis or on a review or an annual basis to ensure that we are being really persistent in our process integrity and to ensure that our actions match our beliefs? You'll probably recall the story that I told when I was a willful youth, and my mother signed me up for a camp called called Super Camp, where I learned about the value and the definition of integrity that I still carry with me today. For a quick recap, it's when your actions match your beliefs. Nice pantomime to help that stick in your brain too. Without further ado, let's dig into Compliance 102. So here we're going to talk about how we can level up beyond best practice. If best practice is compliance, how do we take that and grow with that and grow beyond that and really use it as a differentiator to use what's required to take us to the next level and to really get good at identifying and seizing opportunities that exist in our structure and our framework today so that we can upskill our staff, we can do good work, and we can have a strong business. So best practices and beyond, we're really going to discuss how basic compliance, initial training, annual training, how we can look at those bodies of work that have to be completed and reimagine those for how we can incorporate professional development opportunities and therefore get better at recruiting, retaining both employees as well as clients. So we can use it as a differentiator in the industry and to really show off. So let's talk about definitions. I'm using a lot of fun buzzwords that we've probably heard, and we probably could describe them if somebody asked us, but just for level setting to make sure we're all on the same page, what are upskilling, career paths, and professional development? Well, professional development is the process of growing and advancing through one's career. It is that sort of career journey, that narrative that allows us to navigate and excel and thrive in each of our endeavors at each step of the way. Career paths, therefore, are the ongoing professional development through targeted training. So if we know that we want to work on our project management skills, we might look for a project management certification, or we might look to get involved at various projects at work where we can start applying what we're learning and teaching ourselves, maybe what we're taking through online classes. And that's ways that we can do it in administration. And so it's fun to think about how we can make that relatable and accessible to our caregivers as well, because just because a person has chosen a role in frontline healthcare doesn't mean that they don't also think about how they can grow and excel in their career through targeted skills training and finding various routes of opportunity. And then upskilling is identifying those skills necessary for advancement. So if I know that I want to be at point B by the end of the year, what do I actually need to get there? What are the competencies I need to have? What are the skills I need to have? For example, if I'm a caregiver and my agency offers a mentorship program, and I know I want to be a mentor because I love working with other people in the industry. I love sharing why I love doing this work. How do I get there? Can I ask my manager? Is there an employee review? And what we run into today a lot with caregiving is that there aren't a lot of opportunities to share awareness, to share access, to have these conversations. And so today we're going to talk a little bit more about how we can instigate those conversations and leverage what we learn in talking with our teams and how to make their careers meaningful, and therefore how we can encourage them to grow with us rather than have them leave to go find a different opportunity where the grass may appear to be greener. Let's make our own grass the greenest. The importance of professional development is really all in like the investment and showing that we're investing in our team. Upskilling, career paths, it might seem like nice to haves, but we're seeing an ever increasing need and urgency around offering opportunities to our staff to show that we want to keep them and we want to grow with them. And this shows up in terms of recruitment and retention. And these are common words that I know that we're sick of hearing about. We want it just to be fixed already. How do we fix it? Well, this discussion is how we begin to start fixing it within our own organizations. And ultimately, all of this will reduce administrative cost. It can seem like a contradiction to spend and invest time and money in upskilling and career pathway consideration, but on the back end, the amount of money saved on retention far outweighs the cost of continually working with that rotating door. I'm sure we've all felt it. I'm sure we've seen the impact, and I'm sure that we all know to some extent in our business how the revolving door of employment is impacting our bottom lines. So if we can invest up front and keep people, we are saving long term, and we are saving more over time. Recently, Care Academy, it was about a year ago now, but still fairly recent in terms of research perspective. Care Academy did the Educational Pathways Survey, where we interviewed and discussed with, and mainly did a massive send out of survey to learn from caregivers what it is they're looking for. And part of that project, our marketing team developed this return on investment calculator. Ashwin's going to share the link for the calculator in the chat. It's essentially a sheet that will open up, and it allows you to interact with fields. If you are considering offering a tuition reimbursement, for example, whether it be small scale for certifications at a local vocational school or a little bit bigger for a community college or higher ed degree, you can plug in what you're considering offering, and perhaps it's still all the staff or part of the staff or tenured staff, however you choose to frame it out. You can plug in those numbers, and you can see over time when the business starts to not only make back that investment, but starts to make gains on that investment as that employee is more likely to stay with that educational opportunity that an agency can offer. A few more learnings from that survey really helps highlight that caregivers are interested in advancing their education. And that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody's interested in being an RN or everybody wants a dementia care certification. It looks different for everybody. And so it's important to have that conversation with your team and individuals on your team to learn where it is and how it is they want to grow, because 70% of caregivers told us in our survey that they want to learn, and they want to learn with their agencies. Some reasons include 36% clocked in it. They want to apply their education to make a positive impact in their community. And I think this resonates for a lot of us on the call, because as we know, caregivers are a very special personality type that are often very generous of spirit and want to do good work. And that's why they pursue this industry. It's interesting how we know how hard it is, and almost living in this day in and day out, especially through the pandemic, we experience how difficult it can be. And that doesn't change the fact that people still love doing this work. It's just harder for them to do that work, largely because of, we're all strapped for time and we're all strapped for resources. So how can we consider offering educational solutions that will help caregivers reach where they want to go? 28% said that they wanted to improve their job opportunities. And again, that looks different for everybody. Some people want to be mentors. Some people want to be the best direct care worker they can be. Some people do want to go on to be RNs or administrative staff. So learning that and understanding people's goals is a big part of how we can grow our business by growing the individuals that work with us. 16% simply want to broaden their education. They just want to learn more, and they want to learn more about doing good work. 11% say they want to earn more money. Nothing wrong with that. We work so that we can live in a lot of ways. 6% want a more fulfilling job. That always is a surprisingly low number to me, that only 6% are looking for something that they think would be more fulfilling than the work they're already doing. And then 3% mentioned that it was recommended and supported by their employer. So it came from sort of the outside in. The impact of improving skills through education is shown through this slide, that through satisfaction. So caregiver satisfaction in their role through having access to training, with 76% saying that they would feel substantially more satisfied if they had on the job and intentional job training around the role. 12% said they'd feel slightly more satisfied. That's still on the positive end of the spectrum. 11% clocked in at no change, take it or leave it. And 1% said they would feel substantially less satisfied. I want to know what that 1% group said. I'd like to learn more about why, but we won't get into that today. And then the last piece of data I wanted to share from that educational pathways research that we did was the classification of resources that caregivers are looking for in the pursuit of their education, with 28% saying that they would really like tuition assistance or financial aid so that they can pursue higher ed or additional vocational training. 25% said they would like the ability to earn credits for job training or experience, so using their on-the-job training for further advancement in the educational realm. 20% said they would like access to academic or career advising services. And that one I think is really interesting because the first thought that comes to mind is community partnerships. What does it look like to research the career fairs in the areas, or the local community college or vocational school that's offering advice on career opportunities within healthcare? What does it look like to partner with local groups and organizations to provide access and awareness at little or minimal cost? 18% said they would like more assistance with caretaking or household responsibilities. And 9% said they would like more support from their employer. So surprisingly minimal amount wants and needs more support from their employer. Most folks say they simply need support services and access to get to these things, and they take the onus of it onto themselves through seeking out tuition assistance and financial aid. So it makes me wonder, how can we all work together to see and pursue what it looks like to offer these things to our caregivers, because they do want it. So why aren't we offering certifications as administrators and as nurse educators? And maybe we already are, but if we aren't, why not? Why aren't we offering certifications, career paths, and upskilling? And here's what we're missing out on. So here's the real opportunity of this situation: to go beyond compliance, to complement compliance with certification. So how can we use various types of certifications? Now in this industry, I'll take a quick moment to geek out a little bit about the word certification. It's a tricky one because there's a capital C certification that you can get, and it's accredited through a university or through a vocational school or the Department of Education. And then there's lower C certification, which is a cluster of classes that shows that you've attained competency and a skill set in a certain area. And I think it's important to use the word certification because it acknowledges a certain level, a certain attainment level that is really integral in this industry. As we know, direct care workers provide a lot of value, but that value is oftentimes shadowed through words and like unskilled, through words like micro-credentials. It's almost a diminutization, and it's difficult, therefore, to leverage what a caregiver has and advance themselves with that. So how can we enable people in the space where they are? How can we enable our care workers through the attainment of certifications through on-the-job skills training? Now, this is an interesting fact I wanted to share. My team specializes in knowing the requirements for all the caregivers and all the care settings and all of the states. And what we found is that nearly all initial training requirements and several annual training requirements as well across the nation for home care can contribute to the federal requirements for home health aid certification. So let's think about that. If my caregiver is taking initial training, maybe it's 10 hours, maybe it's 20 hours, maybe it's 40 hours, it depends on the state. All of those classes, most of them at minimum, will fit into the larger home health aid certification. So you might be thinking, well, home health aid is pretty overkill. We don't need to do that. It's beyond our scope. We don't really need to go there. But if you think then about how can we use the building blocks between point A, what needs to be done for compliance, and point B, a caregiver who wants to attain the home health aid, as a certification, as an acknowledgement for that investment of their time, their energy, and their mission in this industry. So if we start with the required 10, 20, 40 hours, what does it look like to then map out over the next 6 to 18 months how a person would get to the home health aide certification? I imagine a conversation like, you join us, we'll get you up to speed, we'll get you working as quickly as possible. And by the way, are you interested in having an additional certification? Because if you stay with us for 6 months, we'd love to get you enrolled in our agency's home health aide training program so you can be a certified home health aide. Does that have an impact? It does, because caregivers want to know that they have access to that, whether or not they tap into it. They also, I think, will be surprised to find, do want to tap into that. They want to explore that. They want to advance themselves. And they may not have a lot of time and energy, but if they know that if we partner with each other as employers and employees to grow ourselves and to grow the business, then it shows a greater investment in the entire team. Other ways you consider, you may consider going beyond compliance and really leveraging the upskilling concept is develop your own professional development program to use the status quo of annual training and transform it completely into something that goes beyond. Most states have an annual training requirement in at least one of the home care-based settings. So if you were to think about that annual training, best practices or literal regulations will state that it has to be X number of hours. It may or may not have to cover certain topics, and that it has to be done every year, either calendar year or by hire date. Oftentimes the state will leave it up to the administrators to figure out what's best for their organization. And best practices will go a little bit beyond and say, you should really make sure that the annual training matches with the caregiver's competencies, which you can determine through annual competency verifications with nurse supervisors, as well as the client population. If a caregiver gets access to a new series of comorbidities and conditions through having a new client on their roster, they're going to need training to better understand how to provide care for that client. Well, let's imagine that a caregiver has a new client that has Parkinson's disease, and they are looking at their annual training as the administrator, as a caregiver, both, and they're not seeing any Parkinson's disease in there. So how do we consider what we do about that? Well, there's a gap. What can we remove from the required annual training and what can we plug in instead? Well, what about a Parkinson's disease certification? Now, not only is that valuable to the caregiver to feel more confident in providing that quality care that they're compelled and mission driven to provide, but we can also tell our clients that all their caregivers that work with people with Parkinson's have a Parkinson's disease certification. So now we've gone beyond the minimum requirement and we've explored what it looks like to upskill the caregiver and then to share that publicly. So you're a differentiator both in the employment space as well as in the care providing space for beneficiaries. You can also consider looking at elective content. What does the caregiver want to learn more about? Maybe they're interested in learning more about dementia. They've taken a couple classes already and they want to learn more. They want to see the full depth of knowledge that they could attain to really provide that high quality care to those who have Alzheimer's and dementia. And then finally, and I mentioned this a little bit with the first one, to offer disease and condition specific based classes. You don't have to necessarily jump all the way into certification. Maybe you dabble and you try, well, let's start you off on respiratory care 101. And then we'll see where to go from there. We'll see if, if you have more interest in that, then we can get you more training in that and we can get you more clients with that type of condition that makes you feel really confident to provide that care. This is especially useful in states with an hourly requirement, but without a topic mandate, because it gives you the maximum flexibility to design whatever your heart desires, whatever your professional development program calls for. The next step is to then think how to involve everyone to think beyond compliance. How do we incentivize and complement our educational interventions to drive completion, to drive skills attainment, and to drive the program in its growth? Because the bigger the professional development program gets, the more notoriety you can get in the industry and in your area and have an easier time recruiting and retaining. So you can consider educational stipends and reimbursements. Earlier, we talked about the ROI investment calculator, which can give you a really good idea about, depending on how much you invest, when you can see those returns through retention. You can consider paid time for training up to X number of hours. So if you know you've got a little bit of space to work with to pay a caregiver for a little bit more time, you can say, you know what, you can take 2 extra hours of training and we'll pay you for it. And let us know what you think of those classes. And then we'll talk about which other classes you want to layer onto it. There are a lot of really incredible state training funds out right now. Because of the pandemic, there was a lot of funding from ARPA into the Department of Labor and WIOA, Workforce Investment Opportunity Act, I want to say. And it will often reimburse training costs once you've registered. For example, in Massachusetts, there's a training fund called Training Pro. And as an agency who's training your own staff, you can sign up on that Training Pro website. You have to log specifically which programs you're offering, for example, home health aid, and then the relative cost to you. And then upon completing that training with a given person or people, you can get reimbursed for that. So there are really great opportunities out there to work with the Department of Labor, either in your state or national training funds. It's only available to providers and in a small population like that. So it gives you front row access to those funds. You can also consider bonuses. So if somebody completes a given certification or has worked a certain number of hours, whatever that threshold or milestone is, I highly recommend talking with your team to figure out what those are that benefit the business and what those and how that coincides with benefiting workers, and to consider what it looks like to bonus out at that point. It's always good to talk with people to learn what they want and how they want it, because sometimes you learn a lot in talking with people instead of about them. You can also consider pay increases, which I know is challenging as we're on the cusp of learning what the Medicare and Medicaid final rules are going to deliver in terms of those reimbursement rates. So I know that that one's going to be a tricky one until we know more about that. You can also look at company newsletter features on success stories. Some people don't like the spotlight, but oftentimes people don't mind sharing their story, and it can be really inspirational for others to learn and see that visibility. That's what happens. I work with her. I'd like to talk with her more about that. She was featured in this week's newsletter as a person who completed a certificate, and I want to ask her more about what that looked like. And then what else? Talk with your team, brainstorm, have a session. I know that occasionally we're getting together, if we have remote teams every now and then, we still get together in person. And every now and then it's fun to have too many colors of sticky notes and some fun colored pens and to do a brainstorming session. And then to take the top 3 or the cluster, the top items to figure out how can we do this in our organization. So to customize it, create a conversation around it at your organization using a framework like this. So great ideas and all, but how do we apply them? Well, I mentioned one possible way: use all the sticky notes and the colors and pop them up and cluster ideas in a brainstorm sort of way. And then to contemplate that framework. What types of professional development program really work best for your organization? Of the list we just looked at, which of those things will not work? Which of those things might work? Which of those things could definitely work? How easy are they? How difficult are they? What are the barriers? How do we overcome those? And it can be nice to kind of classify based on high priority versus low priority, high risk versus low risk, or easy to attain, high impact versus difficult to attain, low impact. You can also examine your existing training program and analyze where there's value and where there are opportunities to transform and maximize the potential. And then I've got to consider this. Every time I write down consider this, I always think of the textbooks from when I used to be back in school. When you open a textbook and there'd be a golden box and it would say, consider this. And it was basically a way to reflect on the learnings from the previous chapter. And I always loved those because it was a way for me to open my mind, think outside the box, and start applying that knowledge. Transform employee reviews for continuous improvement and for quality care. I know that continuous improvement is really big in the healthcare industry, and it is starting to reach into home care and home, well, certainly is in home health. My cat's acting a fool in the bathroom, so you'll have to excuse him. Kevin is notoriously known as the bad kitty in our household. So some options include using language to reflect a symbiotic relationship between employee and employer. So instead of having employee reviews or performance reviews, using language like performance appraisals to identify wins, opportunities, and where and how you want to grow. You can also use stay interviews, which is where you can sit down with employees and learn about your competitive position as an employer. What's working? Why do they stay? What's attractive that you see out there that we're not currently offering? There is a lot of great information with a simple Google search about stay interviews, so I won't go too far into depth, but it's a really great way to have a touch point that encourages communication and trust. And in that, we can grow and have collaboration. I was at the Future Conference last week in New York, hosted by HHCN, Home Healthcare News. And one thing that really hit home for me was we talk about this industry and how challenging it is to bring people in. We talk about how challenging the work is, but we also know how fulfilling it is. We all know why we're here and why we're doing this. And I want to use these next couple of slides to really showcase why this industry is the future, why it's a meaningful career, what our mission is, and to really show it off, because the work that we do is important and it's meaningful, and people love the work that they do in this industry in home care and caring for those who really need it. So I've got a couple of quotes from a roundtable discussion that Care Academy, mainly our outcomes team, led earlier this year as an internal exploration. So I've got a couple of blurbs from that I'd like to share. When we asked caregivers why caregiving, these are some of the responses we've gotten. I felt I had a gift for providing comfort at the end of life. I know that CNA is more at the bottom rung of things, but I feel like that's where you really get into the trenches with people and make deeper connections. I would say it's about helping the aged, the elderly get about their daily activities. They have contributed so much to society, to the nation. Besides the financial rewards, the little that you can do to help them, that's what basically drives me. I've done caregiving for around 40 years now. I started at 17 when my mom became seriously ill. I really loved playing the supportive part and being there for my family, and realized it was something I was passionate about. These stories aren't unique in an interesting way, but the words have impact. And every time I read these, I still feel empathy, deep empathy, because I got started in this industry because of my own personal experience with family caregiving. And I would be willing to bet that several of our attendees today have too. Put yourself in the shoes of this person. What is their experience? How are they feeling? I don't know how you can speak to that in any kind of training title, but if there were subtle ways to integrate and to remember the state of the person, it's not just doing a job. It's not just an action. It's a human in a human situation. This is meaningful work. This is something that can be accomplished only in this industry. You can't get this at McDonald's. You can't get this at Amazon. How do we showcase this and share this with the employment market and share this with our clients in terms of our caregivers are the best because they care? Here are some things that our caregivers said about why they do this work, and therefore create attractions to pull people into this meaningful, mission-driven industry. A few more questions. I'm good at making questions these days. I used to struggle to make the right shape of questions, but because I've been thinking about it so intentionally, constantly for months now, I've got more questions that will help us contemplate how to consider your framework at your organization in how you integrate upskilling and professional development. So there are a lot of questions on this page. We are going to set out this PowerPoint presentation when we're done here today. So don't worry about capturing all of it. Feel free to grab a screen grab if you want to, but it will be coming to you in your email as well as the recording for today's session. So fear not, no need to rush around, but I will highlight a couple of questions, mainly in the first question I'd ask myself is, how are you currently addressing professional development with staff today? Of course, I included a couple considerations, a couple consider thises. I probably should have put a golden box around it just to capture that textbook mentality. How does your organization think about career paths within your business? In an ideal world, what tools or resources or services would you have or be able to offer to your team? And I'd mentioned performance appraisals earlier instead of employee reviews, performance appraisals. These are some good questions to help set the mindset going into it so that we know that we're not adjudicating performance rather, but we're exploring what was your biggest win? Do you see your biggest opportunity? What worked for you? What challenges did you face? Because if we can identify where an employee is feeling successful and where they're feeling inhibited or barriered, that's going to help us better understand how not only to communicate and support our employees, but how to design a career narrative template at our organization so that we can enable the employees we have today, attract the employees that we want to have join our teams, and that we can ultimately share all of this and show it off to our clients. Clients want to know that they're being taken care of by people who care for them and that they're going to do a good job, that they're going to show up, and hopefully that they get to see recognizable faces. And that can be a really difficult one to accomplish, the last one. But if we can give our clients the confidence of knowing that each person that walks in their door is there for the right reasons and has the right skills to perform, that goes a long way in ensuring confidence and trust. And it wouldn't be a compliance webinar if we didn't talk about documentation. So level up your documentation. This is that last little plug for really showcasing what I was just talking about, of taking what we're doing and what we're really excelling at within our agencies and sharing it outward. What does it look like? Policies, protocols, and procedures. And how do we externalize what those are? How do we share information to create awareness of what our employees have access to? Awareness and access were two big barriers that our team learned about in doing our caregiver roundtables earlier this year, and learning about what it is they strive for and how they struggle in getting there. And it was in largely knowing, I don't know what's out there. I don't know what exists for me. I'd like to do more of this, but I don't even know how. Looking at timelines. How do we document what that timeline is? If we know that we were audited today and that we're audited every 2 years, we can say, okay, that's the deadline approximately for when we expect our next audit. Here are the things that we need to have in place and done in advance of that. That way, when you look at your calendar and you get your notification, oh, now's time to review your policies and procedures, and you can document that they've been updated. Therefore, when the surveyor shows up, they know that you're fresh and you're ready. The more ready and prepared you are, the fewer rocks they overturn. There's less snooping that needs to happen, and they can breeze right through. I really like post-event reports. Can seem like there's never enough time to document. So this is where a template will really come into play. What, who, when, where, why. You can even start with a simple framework like that. And then as you go through your post-event reports, you think, oh, you know what? I need to update that template because I want to include this new field because the surveyor was asking about that. Then include that new field. You could make it as simple as a one-pager, a worksheet that enables you to have that visibility. So much happens so quickly. It can be really easy to forget about what happened even a month later, especially around the particulars and especially around contact details. Was I talking with Sherry about that, or was that Mary? I don't know. Was it the surveyor in January, or was the surveyor in June? Who was it that I was working with on that? So having that really clear snapshot, a dashboard about a specific event can be really helpful, whether it be for a survey or an incident report. I know that a lot of times we're required to document incidents, so you could even leverage that set of documentation in considering your template for how you want to think about other events. What other events are worthwhile in documenting? Attestations is one of my personal favorite. It's kind of like a policy, but it's a little bit more public facing, and it allows you to say with confidence, this thing for this person on this day, or this is how we meet compliance through training. One example is in providing caregivers with that recognition and attestation that this caregiver has consistently completed all of their training on time. And it can be a good way to recognize our staff and our teams through a document that says, we did this, it's been done, and we can share this out. And then finally, just in any communications with team, state, clients, and community, that documentation trail is clutch. It's gonna always come in handy. Looking back through records for posterity is something that comes up so often in compliance. And then, of course, you can leverage any one of these, if not more, methods of sharing what you're doing externally. Because if you're doing something internally, you ask yourself, how can I use this for that? How can I share this with the world? And to think about how we push that information outwards to really promote ourselves. So let's wrap it up and talk about some key takeaways from today's session before we get into questions. Employees want to develop their skill set and grow. There are ways to use compliance as a jumping off point for differentiation, including building out a professional development program. There are ways to use these programs to exhibit your agency's excellence and to show how you're better and different than the other agency down the street. And then ultimately, how to reframe our mindset around employee collaboration through performance reviews to improve trust, through stay interviews, through conversation, through that collaborative learning cycle and continuous improvement. Because it comes down to trust in a lot of cases, especially in an industry like this, where we are very mission driven and it's heart-touching work that we do. And with that, I'll open it up to questions. Welcome back, Ashwin. If you will please field our questions for us. I'm sure that we've got a few.
Absolutely. One quick thing. It looks like we're having a little bit of a difficulty with our chat and Q&A feature. So we are going to pivot a little bit from the way we usually do questions. You will notice there's going to be a button at the bottom of your screen that's named Raise Hand. What we will do is if you're raising your hand, you'll be able to come on and ask your question live. If not, we have a couple of questions that people have emailed us through the session, and we can go on with those. But if there's a question that kind of comes about that you want to ask and you're comfortable coming on and asking it yourself, we can do that. But we can get started with some of the questions that we got emailed, which were 2 of them. Erica, one of the questions was kind of getting started with a professional development plan. And the one question that was asked was, how do I know if I'm the right size agency to even get started with that? Like, how do I know? The question was pretty much, if I'm a smaller agency with 12 caregivers, am I really big enough to start my own professional development plan?
I think so. It may look very different than an agency 5 times your size. That's true. And you will have a different set of resources to work with. And that's why asking some questions and considering what can be done versus what should be done, because you may want to, shoot for the moon, but I know in this day and age, we're all having to ruthlessly prioritize what we're doing. And one thing that comes to mind in particular for smaller agencies is to create a mentorship program, to have not only a defined program, but pathways to get into it. Is there a caregiver that has a little bit more seniority or experience? What does that experience look like? What are some of the skills that would enable you to feel confident that caregiver A is going to be a really great mentor to the rest of your organization? So that would be one way to think about it. Another way to look at it would to see, what are you doing today and what do you want to be doing and what are some of the gaps? Is it in competency? Is it in knowing that your caregivers are adequately prepared to go in the door? If you're all set there, then what other skills does it look like? So to consider still asking the questions, but your prioritization and your end result will still look very different. But I firmly believe the professional development at any size agency is possible and essential, because caregivers, regardless of whom they're working for, want to grow.
Awesome. And when I asked the second question, it also came through, which had to do with the performance review part of the presentation. And the question was, my churn cycles for caregivers are really high. My caregivers, I'm like moving screens along a little bit. My caregivers' churn rate is on average about 2 to 3 months. They don't really make it to the performance review. How can I be using performance reviews when my caregivers don't even stay for that long?
That's a great question. I wonder what it looks like to have check-in interviews at 30, 60, and 90 days. So instead of having an annual cycle, what does it look like to contort that and make it fit your needs today? Because if you're dealing with a shorter timeline, you're absolutely right. A year is not going to cut it, because you're not going to get there to gather any of that information. So what does it look like to pair that down, if you already have an annual review, to scale it back or to reconfigure it to fit a 30-day check-in, a 60-day check-in, a 90-day check-in. Another item to consider would be to talk with the caregivers that are staying past those 90 days. What are they, what is making them stay? How can you to consider is the exit interview as people are leaving, which I'm sure can be difficult because as people are leaving, they're already out the door. Can you even get a hold of them? But it doesn't hurt to try, and you may only get through to 1 in 10. But to still consider that process. Of course, please consult with your human resources and legal teams, because there are definitely considerations to how to execute these items. But there are definitely ways that you can be leveraging these systems in a framework that makes more sense for your specific challenges.
Wonderful. I haven't noticed any hand raises as of just yet. If anyone has a question they would like to ask and is comfortable asking them, you can still raise your hand. Alternatively, we're going to move on to the next slide. And we will allow for, if you have any questions, you
What's
can.
next? If you're a Care Academy customer and you want to know more about any of these solutions, Care Academy has a full gamut of opportunities, from certifications to specialized trainings to micro or rather modular trainings where it's less than an hour and can be applied more exactingly. Reach out to Kelly Saintis. She's absolutely wonderful. And her email's right there, first initial, last name @Care Academy. If you're not already a customer and you want to talk with us more and you want to learn about more of what we're offering, what we do, and how we help agencies grow, schedule a demo by clicking on this link or typing it into your search bar. You won't be able to click on the presentation, obviously, but Ashley will be sure to send this slide deck out, which will give you access to these links. Or you can email us at teamcareacademy@careacademy.com. I would encourage y'all, as you mull this over and as you read through materials and talk about it with your team and staff, to please reach out to us in the coming days to weeks. We're here to help, we're here to talk, we're here to learn, we're here to grow. So don't hesitate to reach out with any questions as they arise. We'd love to talk with you. And with that, if we have no hand raises and no more emails, would love to give y'all about 12 minutes of your life back. The greatest gift of all time. Happy birthday. So thank you so much, Ashwin, and thank you everyone for joining us.
Wonderful. And just a quick reminder to everyone, we will be sharing slides and recordings within the next 24 to 48 hours. So look out for that. And if you have any other questions, the emails are right here, but they'll also be in the slide deck as well as the follow-up email. So thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.